My biggest complaint against the trolls is that they hardly ever give us any examples. I mean, there's a story about Charlize Theron. I mean, at one point, this woman was named one of the most beautiful woman in the world. She's from South Africa. She adopted a couple of little fellas and brought them to the States. So now she's on the major magazines saying she might have to leave the United States, and because she's not sure where she can take her two little fellas and raise them without the threat of violence directed to them. But she just doesn't give us any examples of where this happens in the States. I mean, where is there an epidemic of black on white violence? Where are the no-go zones where black people cannot go? Where? Just give me an example. You want examples the other way around? We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. We document that here every day. And just because you ignore the evidence, that doesn't mean the evidence doesn't exist. We have another troll on our channel. His big thing for the last couple weeks is constantly telling everybody he wants to talk to me on the phone for 20 minutes just so he can basically change my life and shut the whole channel down once I realize what an enormous mistake he has made. He says we're setting stereotypes and causing danger to black people who are not leading a criminal lifestyle. We report on stereotypes largely created by black people in their own music, in their own churches, in their own leaders. We report on that. And when we talk about the number of black people we're talking about, here's the number. It's X the number of people who are involved in this criminal behavior so wildly out of proportion. We know that 35% of black men are going to spend some time in prison. But a bigger number than that is the number of people, black and white, who ignore, deny, condone, excuse, encourage, and even lie about this ridiculous level of black criminality and black violence that we see every day on this channel. So what's that number? Add X plus Y. What's that number? That's a huge number. The trolls just can't deal with that. They can't grok it. Because every day they're saying, no, this, either A, it doesn't exist, B, white people do it too, or C, white people deserve it. But they just don't give us enough examples of how that is true. Yet whenever we need an example, all we have to do is pretty much just, reach into the ether and pick something out at random. What about this little story out of Atlanta, where not only do we get a story of black mob violence and criminality, we get a whole new saying. We learn something. We learn that teenagers can get very excitable. That's why they steal cars and run people over.
New at 5, chaos at the airport as car thieves try out a new tactic. They jump on MARTA, head to Hartsfield-Jackson, and then pull a gun on the employee at the car rental counter. Then they took off in cars, crashing into and damaging a number of other vehicles as they drove away. Fox 5's Morse Diggs joining us now live from the airport with a closer look at these crimes. Morse?
I can't imagine being in that car rental center when this chaos broke out. 7 young people trying to take the cars, ramming security barriers over and over again. They could have run someone over. It's common to all airports, acres and acres of rental cars. The major companies stress convenience for the customer. Just reserve a vehicle ahead of time and go right out to the lot and drive off. The criminals know the policy. Police say a week ago at night, it turned chaotic when 7 teens and young men, and here's a photo of one of them, came onto the property. A car lot attendant told authorities he was threatened with a gun. That was followed by the men jumping into cars and attempting to drive off. But they encountered exit barriers meant to prevent unauthorized drive-offs. Sources say they rammed the barriers over and over again, damaging 7 vehicles belonging to one of the companies. They're young people, they can get excited, they could have run over somebody.
Absolutely.
They're young people, they can get excited, they could have run over somebody.
Absolutely.
They're young people, they can get excited, they could have run over somebody.
Absolutely, and that's our fear,
Right.
is that them being able to get a hold of those vehicles and to operate those vehicles, that's nothing that we can accept. So what we got to do is make sure that we make it harder for them to get control of the cars.
Now, Major Peak says they're going to do further interviews regarding the talk about a gun being pulled. Now, here's what did happen. Ultimately, though, they were able to get out 1 car out of that area, damaging 7 others. Now, also what happened, this group, perhaps the same people, came back several hours later trying to do the same thing, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, they weren't able to get any vehicles.
Didn't Warren Zevon write a song about that? He's just an excitable boy. Well, what about this story out of Philadelphia? These guys must be teenagers. Maybe they just stayed excitable their whole life. Here we have a family. I think it was an Asian family, but it was either Asian or white. The guy's packing up his kids in the car. Somebody dressed as a mailman. I mean, this was like a heist. Somebody dressed as a mailman came walking down the street, forced them into the house, beat the hell out of them, and robbed them. Was that because they're just too excitable? And how about this story?
A Stockton food vendor is recovering at home tonight after he was shot and robbed while he was working. Stockton police officers are still looking for the people responsible and are also investigating a similar incident that happened a few days ago to another food vendor.
CBS 13's Carlos Correa is in Stockton with more on those cases.
Laying in the comfort of his own bed, Stockton businessman and grandfather Ramon Lopez says he's happy to be alive. Don Ramon, as he's known to many people, survived a violent attack.
Me estoy sintiendo ya un poco mejor.
He says, I'm feeling a little better now. All I remember is being punched by 3 young men and then being shot. On Easter Sunday, Lopez was selling corn when he was hit from behind. Lopez was armed with a machete, and as he attempted to defend himself, one of the suspects shot him.
Uno anda trabajando.
He says you have people that work to provide for their families, and then these delinquents come to steal your hard-earned money and take your life, just like they almost took mine. Stockton police officers also investigating another attack that happened just a few days ago. That case on Lafayette Street and Burkett Avenue, also involving a food vendor.
So one of the things that food truck vendors can work on is probably work in pairs, if at all possible. This way there's not one person, one sole person.
Officers say food vendors should limit the amount of cash they carry. If they are working in a food truck, keep the doors locked and get a good description of the suspects if you're assaulted.
Well, I think that's messed up because that's how he makes his money.
Doctors say Don Ramon will be bedridden for at least 4 months. Now the community is coming together to raise money for him and his family.
Well, it's heartbreaking because of that. He's not going to be able to work. He's going to have to stay home and recover whenever he can be out there, making his money like he wants to.
Why don't we run down to Baltimore now? This story sounds, in Baltimore, the one you're about to see, if this sounds like one we just did the other day on Biloxi, Mississippi, don't mix them up. Yeah, this chick in Biloxi, Mississippi, she was going to her car, a bunch of the fellas came along, beat the hell out of her. But this story is Fells Point in Baltimore. This is near the Inner Harbor. This is one of the urban areas that have been reclaimed. It's a safe spot. This stuff doesn't happen here. Let's see what happened to her.
Tonight, police are searching for a group of men they say carried out back-to-back robberies in Fells Point in the middle of the day. WJZ is live at City Police Headquarters. George Sola speaks with the victim of one of those robberies who also says she was attacked. George.
That's right. Good evening, Vic. All this over one of these, a cell phone. Melanie McZossi says she was out for a walk, about to check her email, when a group of men not only stole her phone, but attacked her in the process. And it turns out she wasn't the only victim. Melanie McZossi not shying away from speaking about the attack that left her with this.
It was probably less than 45 seconds.
A shiner that might rival that of a boxer after a title fight, and while punches were clearly thrown.
They diagnosed me with a concussion and soft tissue damage.
By no means was this a fair fight.
And honestly, with 4 of them, it's so hard to recall which details, I could remember.
Migzowski, one of 2 victims of back-to-back robberies taking place minutes apart in Fells Point Tuesday. Police say they were carried out by these suspects. The images of 3 of the 4 suspects coming from nearby security cameras.
One of the suspects was apparently carrying a backpack that had some sort of orange trim. So we're hoping that that could be enough detail for maybe someone to give us a call if that jogs someone's memory.
Migzowski's robbery taking place while she was on a walk near South Washington Street and Eastern Avenue. The thieves targeting her cell phone.
The second guy started hitting me, and then he and the first guy took off.
Migzowski says she then attempted to follow the group to try and make sure she could give a description.
I don't think that letting fear get the best of you is the way to handle it.
Police say the second robbery of a 27-year-old man took place near Wolf and Fleet Street. A weapon reportedly used in that one. Migzowski justifiably angry, but her concern now turns to ensuring no one else suffers a similar fate.
If we don't catch them now, we don't have a chance to prevent this from happening to somebody else.
When we do these stories, the last resort of the trolls, after we destroy everything they say, the last resort of the trolls is to remind us, well, Colin, your stories are just anecdotal. Well, what about what happened in Philadelphia the other day at the Starbucks? 2 of the fellas go in, they decide they want to sit there, they want to use the restroom without buying anything. They later on said they were afraid for their life. Yeah. But that's a national news story. That's causing 8,000 Starbucks and 170,000 Starbucks employees to take a day off, going to cost them $16 million. And you don't call that anecdotal? We have so many videos out of Starbucks. The fellas rushing in, stealing laptops, rushing out. Is that anecdotal? Anecdotal means... anecdotal is just one. To say something is anecdotal is just another method of denial now. To say something is anecdotal is to say, Colin, your examples are too powerful. Can't you just go back to the charts and the graphs and the statistics, the ones nobody pays attention to? We'd much rather talk about that than have you give us examples of this ridiculous level of black violence and criminality so wildly out of proportion. We'd much rather do that than have you expose the reporters and public officials who are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it, but above all, just don't want to make the black kids angry.